everybody, my name is Cheryl. Welcome back to Merpire Makes. Today, Darwin and I are going to answer 20 sewing questions. I saw Chris from Unsocial do this, and I just thought it was really interesting to hear her answers. I thought it'd be fun to do it myself. I have been sewing this week, but just for clients, nothing for myself, so I don't have anything really to show you anyways. And I do have the questions saved on my phone, so without further ado, let's get started. Question number 1, how do you feel about using a new pattern? I feel pretty much fine about it. I think I have a little bit more trepidation now that I've started doing fitting adjustments, especially bust adjustments. I recognize that to make wearable garments, I pretty much have to do those adjustments, but it still does give me it's just one more barrier to using a new pattern. So there's a new company I've tried. It's called Made for Mermaids. They're an independent pattern designer, and their patterns seem to fit me pretty much spot on from the one pattern that I've made. So I'm pretty excited to sew another one of their patterns. So I guess I do have some hesitation to using a new pattern. However, there's not really very many patterns that I've tried previously that fit me well enough that I would want to just sew them again, like over and over and over again, with the exception of that one Simplicity shorts and skirt pattern that I'll pop up here. But overall, I think that I feel excited to use a new pattern because it's normally something that I haven't really tried. So yeah, I guess I have mixed feelings. Question number 2, do you remake or mend? Yes to both. Like I said, that Simplicity pattern, I've made 3 versions at least that are still like in rotation in my wardrobe, and I do mend all the time. I don't see the point in not mending, especially I mend ready to wear and handmade clothes, and I just hate things going to waste. So if it needs to be mended, I just mend it. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. It does take some time, and I do have to be in the correct mindset for it. It's not something I'm like, oh, there's a hole, and I mend it immediately. It's, oh, there's a hole. It goes in my like hand sewing or repair pile, and then every couple of months, I'll just have the mood for it, and I'll sit down and I'll mend like a ton of projects at once, or do any hand sewing that I've been putting off. That kind of goes in the same category in my brain. So yeah, I'll definitely remake patterns if they fit, and I definitely mend clothes. Number 3, do you do twirls or mock-ups? Kind of. I always aim for it to be a wearable mock-up, and typically my mock-up is going to be um, like a straight sew of the pattern without any alterations. I think that might change as I get more comfortable with alterations, but I don't want to make alterations that I don't need. So especially if it's a new pattern company, like I said, the Made for Mermaids top that I just made, I knew that the fabric I used was thrifted, and I knew that it was going to be a mock-up more than anything. So I just sewed it up in the recommended size, and that actually worked out really well. I'm glad I didn't try to make any adjustments before I sewed that. But even though it didn't end up really fitting in the long run, I did consider that a mock-up from the beginning. Question number 4. How do you feel about pre-washing fabrics? So I'm very, very strongly in favor of pre-washing fabrics. I used to do laundry professionally like a long time ago. And my boss's favorite thing to say was, if it's new, it's dirty. Not only do they add like starch and certain chemicals to keep fabric or any clothes from wrinkling while it's like sitting out for customers to view, you don't know who's handled that. You don't know what's happened in the shipping process. That fabric is dirty. Your new clothes that you just bought, those are dirty too. Additionally, for sewing, you want to make sure that whatever the fabric's going to do in the washer and dryer is done before that you sew it up. So any shrinking, any discoloration that's going to happen, that's already happened, and you know that the garment that you sew from that fabric is going to stay the same size or the same color or whatever it is. And I definitely also recommend washing the fabric in the same way that you're going to wash the garment. So if you know in your heart that you're only ever going to throw it in the washer and the dryer, do that to the fabric. If it's going to need to be hand wash the fabric. You know, whatever it is, make sure that you're matching the way you're washing the fabric with the way you're going to wash the garment. You just avoid surprises that way. Number 5, do you finish your seams and how? I do finish my seams, and I'll use any whatever method seems the most convenient. I have a serger, so sometimes I serge the edges. I'll zigzag the edges. I have pinking shears, so I'll pink the edges. I also really like French seams, so I'll do a French seam if I feel like that's the most appropriate. But yeah, any method out there for finishing seams, I probably tried it, and I definitely prefer to finish the seams rather than have my garment unraveling as I wear it. What is your favorite sewing activity? My favorite is the planning. I love imagining myself in new outfits. And then of course, I like having a new piece of clothing. I really like that too, but the planning process definitely is my favorite. I love imagining all the cool things I can wear and then trying to figure out the right pattern and the right fabric to go along with it. Yeah, definitely the planning stage. Oh, number 7, what is your least favorite? That's the pattern prepping the pattern, cutting it out, deciding what my size should be, making any alterations that I need, and then actually cutting out the fabric. I think part of what I don't like about it is that I can't just do it. So I don't have a sewing space specifically. So a lot of that stuff happens on the floor here in the front room, in the living room. So step 1 for that is that I have to clean. I have to pick up all the dog toys. I have to sweep and probably mop the floor and then let it dry. So all of that prep takes up a lot of time, and then because I never finish that all in one setting, I know I'm going to have to do that again the next day. So it's just one more sort of mental barrier to the that process, which is one of the reasons I do like batch cutting so much. 8, stash fabric or new fabric. Um, I don't get very much new fabric. I bought some swimsuiting fabric recently, but that's the first new to me fabric I've had in a really long time. My stash is also pretty small though. I've been thrifting quite a bit this year, so it's getting a moderate size. I don't know. I just sew from my stash. No, she's being really fussy. I'm sorry, but it's not because I don't want to sew from new fabric. It's just because I don't really have the opportunity to. She thinks she should be out on a walk. Are pockets a must? No, they're not a must. If I can fit it in, if the fabric's the right weight and the garment can support pockets, of course I add pockets, but I don't really sweat over not adding pockets. I have a couple of fanny packs that I throw on quite often, like when I'm walking the dogs. If my garment doesn't have pockets, so it's not really that big a deal. Sorry, everybody out there who's like super pro pockets. Like, I get it. But sometimes the fabric just won't support a pocket. Question number 10, knits or wovens? I don't really have a preference. I'm trying to sew up a lot of knits right now just because I haven't in the past. But I think wovens for bottoms and knits for tops is what I would prefer to wear. So that's kind of what I'm trying to sew up. But they both have their pros and cons. You can make amazing sculptural stuff out of wovens and stuff with amazing drape. And you can do the same with knits, like a scuba knit versus like a jersey knit. I'll just use whatever fabric is best for that project. I don't think I really have a preference. 11, favorite fasteners or no fasteners? Um, do I have a favorite? No fasteners would be great, but I like things to be pretty fitted, so you do need fasteners. And then I think I have a slight preference for buttons. My machine does have a buttonhole foot, but it only works about half the time, so I do hand sew most of my buttonholes, and I don't mind it. I do have to be in the right mood, but it doesn't take that long once you get used to it. Zippers, I don't mind. I'm not very good at them, but I also don't mind wearing like a kind of a bad zipper either. So there's a lot you can do, with the iron. Question number 12, sewing for yourself or for others. I'm a pretty selfish person. I definitely prefer to sew for myself, but I also get a lot of joy out of sewing for others. Those aprons I made earlier in the year for my nieces were really fun to make. I don't know if it's because they were small, but they really loved them. So I was really happy to make those. I sew for my husband a handful of times a year, and it's pretty mixed results. I think because I'm not very good at fitting, and he's kind of petite for a guy, and most patterns don't really accommodate for that. So I think that as I move forward learning to fit and I learn to fit him better as well, I'll probably sew for him more. It is nice to have someone around who like appreciates things that you make for them. Historically, I've been a knitter, and as some of the people even watching this channel, like I knitted for them and then they never wore it. I'm sure they appreciated it, but it either was just like not their colors or not really their style, or a lot of times when I was learning to knit, I would knit something that I wanted to knit and then I just gave it to the person that I thought best suited it, but it didn't necessarily suit them. And especially because when I was learning to knit, I was living in Texas. Like, not very many people in Texas need a lot of knitted items. So those things just kind of sat around and it kind of burnt me out. I really only knit for myself now or my husband. I never knit for anybody else anymore because knitting is so much more time consuming than sewing is, and to watch something that you spent so long knitting just sit in someone's closet and collect dust is kind of heartbreaking. No shade to the people, you know, you didn't need it. So, it's as much my issue as it was, it's just, you don't need it. Why would you wear it? So, my husband appreciates the things that I make for him. So, it's nice to make things for him because I know that he's going to wear it. Some people have this like mentality where like this is handmade, it's really precious, and then you save it for special occasions, or you don't want to damage it. But I would much rather see you wear it out and throw it away or outgrow it or whatever, than just to watch it sit around and I don't know. It kind of makes me sad. So I don't really sew for many people either, but my husband is an exception, and I think my nieces will be an exception going forward as well. 13, YouTube or Instagram? Hands down YouTube. I freaking love YouTube. I have an Instagram. I guess I'll link it below. I've only used it to enter challenges. I find it kind of frustrating the challenges are all on Instagram. I get it from the perspective of the challenge organizers, but I really dislike Instagram. 14, dresses or separates? Separates. I like to be able to mix and match my pieces. And even though there are a couple dresses that I do want to make, I've talked about them for this summer, for the most part, I feel like I look better in separates and I'm more comfortable in separates. How do you get rid of or pass on me-mades? For my knitted stuff, I actually have one friend who, like, I know her style so well, and so I'll send her a picture and like kind of the measurements. We're not very similar sizes, but I think I prefer my clothes tighter and she prefers her clothes looser, so it kind of works out that way. But I'll send her a picture of like a sweater or a vest that I've knit that I really enjoyed knitting but didn't quite suit me at the end. And I'd be like, "Do you want this?" And if she says yes, I know she's gonna wear it to death, so I'll send it to her. Sewn stuff, I probably ends up in a thrift store if I can't figure out a way to reuse it. Like, some of it just gets cut up for pockets. Some of it gets cut down into like a smaller garment, like a dress into a skirt or a dress into a top. And there are a couple projects that I have thrown away because I sewed them so badly I could not see a way to salvage even the fabric. Question 16, quick sew or involved sew? A quick sew appeals to me in a lot of ways, but now that I'm focusing more on garments that I want to wear regularly, I think I'm going to have to shift towards more involved sews because I want the fit to be like really good. But then you do also run into the issue of if it's an involved sew, like, are you going to lose steam? I might. So, and then it'll sit in my cart for a couple months. Like that pirate shirt, the sleeves are more complicated than I thought. So it's just been sitting in the cart for like, I don't know, since February or something. Question 17, social or solitary? I don't have any friends here. I don't know anybody here. My sewing is pretty solitary. It's one of the reasons I started this YouTube channel, is because I did kind of want that social aspect. I want people to talk to about sewing. I want to show off my makes. I want to ask people's opinions. So the reality is solitary. The goal is social. Question 18, do you have a dedicated space? No. The living room is basically a craft room. We don't have a TV or anything in here. So we don't spend too much time unless we're crafting. And the living room, we had intended for it to be 50-50, my husband's hobbies and mine, but I definitely am taking over. So we bought another shelf to give us a little bit more organization, but already the pets are taking that over. I don't know. Yeah, we need some bins or something up because I want to move my fabric in here so I can like look at it and be inspired. But I do not have a sewing room. And actually, when we lived in Florida, I had a sewing room, and I was never in there because I felt so isolated. I married my husband because I like him and I want to spend time with him. So when he is home, I like hang out with him. So going into a separate room and like shutting myself off and like getting down to sew did not appeal to me. And I was never in there. I sew way more here where it's just in the living room. 19, labels or no? No. I cut labels out of my ready-made clothes. I have like a lot of sensory issues. So no labels for me. That would probably drive me crazy. Though I've seen some really cute ones out there. Question number 20, percent of me made versus ready to wear. I don't have that many clothes. I got rid of a lot of clothes, and I really only purchased new things from the thrift store or from like Costco that I needed for work. That being said, my percentage of me mates is quite small. I would say probably 10 or 15%. Going forward, of course, I'm aiming to change that. I want to make more and more and more clothes and kind of stop buying new clothes that aren't thrifted. I'm never going to stop thrifting. But honestly, in the area we're at now, I don't really find very many thrifted clothes that I like besides some work bottoms. But, I think a lot of us get into sewing because we have a fitting difference between our body and what ready to wear comes in. So tops for me never fit. My bust is way too big compared to what the pattern what the ready to wear companies are making clothes for. So I pretty much never buy tops anyways, unless it's like this. It's like a workout top. It doesn't fit that well either, but you can't really tell because it is knit. So that's it. That's the end. I would love to hear down below how you feel about these questions. If you're a YouTuber, please make a video. I found these really interesting. It was nice to think about too, especially the percent of me made versus ready to wear, and really kind of be honest with myself about how few makes like stay in my closet. I thought that was really interesting. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you next week.